Hello and welcome to the Farming Today This Week podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, we get the latest on plans to ban trail hunting as the government launches a consultation.
This is about people who are determined to keep hunting foxes, hares, deer, and will not comply with the law, exploiting every loophole, creating smokescreens. That's why we need the law to be tightened up.
There will be a way forward. We will find a way forward. The sadness is that has to be in opposition to a government which seems absolutely determined to allow a continuing culture war in the countryside.
We hear from the farming communities that aren't so wild about wildfowl.
They trample crops. The geese defecate all over grass that cause the sheep to become very ill. Every interaction with the geese population causes damage to the crofters.
And cheering us up all this week, the singing farmers who got the golden buzzer.
I always try and belt out a few tunes every day if I'm feeling a bit sad. So throw those curtains wide. One day like this a year would see me right.
Wow. More on that later. We're going to start, though, by looking back. Every week on Farming Today, which you can, of course, hear on weekday mornings at 5:45 here on Radio 4, we have a theme. Next week, it's sheep. But this week, it was a bit different, as we focused on some of the pivotal moments in farming history, which made for some fascinating listening. For instance, the Victorians. As populations grew rapidly, farmers in the 19th century strove to advance the way they grew crops, to breed more profitable animals and take advantage of new inventions, as Bob Huckenhull reports.
A coming together of horses and machinery would revolutionise farming in the Victorian era. At Acton Scott Heritage Museum in Shropshire, Edward, a magnificent shire horse, supervised by the farm manager Alaric Bowler.
So what Edward's doing now is he's going around basically in a circle. He's attached to the horse gin, which then turns a bigger wheel, powers a belt, and then goes to the kibbler, which is for crushing corn and to make corn, like the wheat and everything, more digestible for things like poultry. Prior to horsepower, it would have been children in the morning doing it before they go to school.
Edward the Shire Horse belongs to Steve Ledsham, who started a project at Acton Scott to grow crops. So Steve, we've walked Edward to the edge of some land and you're farming it in the same way as the Victorians would have done.
They primarily used a Norfolk four-course crop rotation. You've got to keep the land in good heart, so you've got to make sure it's fertilised and you've got to make sure the weeds are kept clean. So that enabled you to grow 2 exhaustive crops and 2 regenerative crops. So basically you started off with winter wheat. In the spring you'd sow a spring crop, and then in between those 2 corn crops you've got a root crop, and if you put the root crop is a cleaning crop really, because you can clean the land while the roots are growing, you keep the weeds down, and then you also put the muck in the ridges that you sow in the roots. And then the spring sown oat is undersown with a clover and a ryegrass mixture, and the clover puts the nitrogen back in the soil. Kept the land in a better, in my opinion, it kept the land in a far better condition than the land is today.
Livestock also underwent dramatic changes during the 1800s.
What we've got here is our Gloucestershire Old Spot pigs. These are sort of typical of the breed that they would have had in the Victorian era. So the Victorian era, they saw massive advances in livestock breeding to maximise characteristics for productivity. I mean, added to that as well would have been better nutrition, which then further led to agricultural shows, so you could showcase these animals and hike your prices up for purebred ones that have won prizes.
When Queen Victoria came to the throne, the Corn Laws were in place. They kept grain prices high and prevented cheap imports. But the laws were repealed in 1846, paving the way for more competition from abroad. Farm manager Alaric Bowler again.
Technological advances in the way of steam power to boats and trains, as well as advances in agricultural machinery, saw a drop in British corn prices due to vast quantities being able to be harvested and shipped from places like North America at low prices. Constant reductions in the need for workforces on top of cheap importation, led to less and less labour needed in rural locations.
Bob Huckenhull reporting there. Now, most people love to see and hear a skein of geese flying overhead, but in Scotland it can make farmers and crofters more than a little uncomfortable, knowing that their grass or barley could become the birds' dinner. It seems climate change and other developments are presenting some knotty problems, and Scottish farmers want more government action over goose management. How big is this problem and what are the answers? Richard Baines has been finding out.
I'm taking the short ferry ride to the island of Ling, off the Argyll coast, south of Oban. Warmer weather brought by climate change is allowing more geese of all species to survive and thrive. But there are other factors.
Better quality grass swards being created.
I'm travelling with Alistair McGugan, goose expert with the Government Wildlife Agency NatureScot.
For example, on Islay, putting more fertiliser out onto the fields. That's then creating better conditions for geese such as Greenland barnacles to overwinter in better condition and go back to their breeding grounds in Greenland in better condition.
So what problems do geese cause? Here on Ling, Archie Cadzow is doing battle with the birds on the family's beef and sheep farm.
20 years ago we probably didn't see an awful lot here of any geese, maybe a few migratory ones, but now we see resident Canada and grey-lag geese, and then we see barnacle geese coming down to overwinter. They come in much larger numbers, big 500 strong groups. The way they do graze is that they pull the whole root out of the ground and that plant can't regenerate.
What can you do about it?
Scare them away. Barnacle are protected. We are encouraged to shoot Canadas, and you can set up these systems, your classic crow scarer, but they get quite used to that. So no, our options are drive at them with a quad bike and try and push them off.
They trample crops, in particular the beer barley crop, which is kind of a shorter height plant, and the geese consume it in vast quantities.
John Gillies is from Storus Uist, the community owner of the South Uist crofting estate in the Outer Hebrides. There are around 9,000 grey-lag geese there.
The geese defecate all over grass which the sheep and cattle eat. It causes the sheep to become very ill. Every interaction with the geese population causes damage to the crofters.
There is some NatureScot money in the Western Isles for goose problems, but John Gillies says it's not enough.
If a goose is laying, between 6 and 8 eggs, and half of those eggs are turning into chicks that are surviving, and half the geese population is female, they're never going to kill enough geese to actually reduce the size of the flock.
We're not getting such hard winters as we were previously. So some of our migratory geese, particularly greylags, coming in from Iceland and other species coming in from Greenland, they're not going as far south, so they're staying up in, say, Caithness and Orkney. And that's then multiplying the problem for the farmers in Orkney, who are already dealing with about 24,000 greylag that are breeding there all the year round.
One of the solutions on Orkney has been to permit the sale of goose meat to encourage shooting. But each location and each species requires a different set of solutions.
Let's take barnacle geese on Islay, the Greenland barnacle geese. There we do have a management scheme. The farmers are reseeding a ground that's protected, or on another area where it's a feeding area, so therefore you're not allowed to scare them on those fields. So they're able to use different fields for different purposes, and there is a payment there for that. But there is also lethal control going on, lethal scaring going on.
The National Farmers Union Scotland has called for urgent action over geese from the government. Scottish Agriculture Minister Jim Fairley says the government spends £1 million a year on goose mitigation and is working with stakeholders on new ways forward after a policy review. And it's just announced an extra £20,000 to cut goose numbers in the Uists and the neighbouring island of Barra.
Richard Baines reporting there. Seafood processors are getting ready for new rules which will affect the way they deal with shellfish. Crustaceans like lobsters, crabs and prawns are now recognised as sentient beings which can feel pain. Under the government's animal welfare strategy, announced at the end of last year, they must be dispatched as painlessly as possible before they're cooked. Well, Anna Hill joined Paul Harding from the Colchester oyster fishery at a workshop on Mersey Island in Essex to find out what that means for the industry and how they're using new technologies to process other types of shellfish, bivalves like mussels, clams and oysters.
If we start outside, there are 2 washing machines. We're very muddy here, so they need washing twice. they just get emptied into blue trays for depuration.
UV light.
UV light sterilises the water, and that circulates through the oysters for a minimum of 42 hours.
But Paul Harding has taken cleaning up the oysters to another level. The bivalves are taken to a pressure machine which is usually used by fruit juice companies to remove viruses. It's the first time any shellfish processor has used this method.
We put the oysters in water, and that goes through a machine which takes it to 6,000 bar of pressure. 6,000 bar is 6 times the pressure at the deepest part of the ocean. What that does, it kills anything within the oyster. It kills the oyster, but kills anything within the oyster. But it's guaranteed safe and it's ready to go.
Things are changing for crustacea processing too. New rules are being brought in to ensure all crustacea are killed humanely before cooking. David Jarrett, Chief Executive of the Shellfish Association of Great Britain, organised the workshop.
Conscious boiling is now deemed to be not appropriate.
Now, conscious boiling means putting a live animal into boiling water.
That's correct. And some people have been doing that for many, many years. And a lot of places around the world still do that. But under the Welfare of Animals at Time of Killing legislation, that will be deemed inappropriate. So large crustacea, crabs, lobsters, langoustine, will have to be killed before cooking. And that is where it's going to have a huge impact on the hospitality sector. The question is, will they turn around and not want to do the killing via electronic stunning or the killing with mechanical means, that is spiking of crabs or splitting of lobsters? Because if they won't, they'll end up buying frozen, which means they'll be buying imported produce.
Has that met the same animal welfare standards as the UK?
No, short answer, they won't have been. The lobsters particularly will be Canadian, and at the moment there are only 2 or 3 countries worldwide that recognise crustacea as being sentient.
And Canada isn't one of them.
And Canada's not one of them. Our concern is the impact on the hospitality sector and the damage that could do to our supply chains in the UK.
For chefs, it means bringing in new equipment to stun lobsters, crabs and langoustines, or splitting lobsters in half before they're cooked. Private chef Mark Lloyd agrees animal welfare is paramount, but the new rules will add cost.
All chefs don't want any animal suffering before we kill it in any form or cook it or eat it. We want to do it in the most effective, safest way possible. This process is going to add possibly a lot more paperwork. It's going to be more expensive for the kitchens. I'm concerned that we will resort to cheaper imported prepared ingredients rather than our own British ingredients at a time when our producers need to be supported the most.
Mark Lloyd there. Well, he was talking about prices there, and war in the Middle East continues to disrupt supplies of fuel and fertiliser around the world. The National Farmers Union here has warned that inflationary pressures from the conflict could soon be seen in food prices. And there are concerns about CO2 shortages. CO2 is a byproduct of fertiliser manufacturing, and it's used for stunning pigs in abattoirs, packaging salads and making fizzy drinks. A bioethanol plant in Teeside, which was the UK's only remaining manufacturer of CO2 gas, closed last year because after a trade deal saw tariffs removed on imports of American bioethanol, it couldn't compete. However, the Ensus site in Redcar is to start production again with £100 million from the government. Chris MacDonald is the Minister for Industry.
One of the consequences of the conflict in the Middle East has been a constraint of supply for a number of chemical products. And there's an increase in fuel prices, which has impacted on the production of carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide's vital for our economy in a number of different ways. And the Ensus plant as a whole is a very important part of the Wilton Chemicals cluster as well. So actually bringing this plant back online, I'm really pleased that we've managed to do that because it also makes the Wilton Chemicals cluster more financially sustainable.
Shortages of fertiliser are being felt by UK farmers. Robin Aird manages Charlton Park Farm near Malmesbury in Wiltshire.
We paid about £350 a tonne for our fertiliser. If I wanted to go and buy fertiliser today, we'd be looking around £600 a tonne, but the biggest issue is availability. So if you're a 100-hectare farm, so 250 acre, and you were looking to go and purchase fertiliser today, you'd be having to find around £14,000 extra on top of your standard fertiliser cost.
Well, who better to talk about all of this than the Agricultural Economics Society, which held its annual conference in Oxford this week. Paul Wilson, the outgoing president, spoke to Anna Hill.
The food system that we operate in the UK is increasingly globalised, so anything that disrupts trade will very quickly lead through to potential disruptions in terms of food for consumers. The only people who may benefit in this kind of scenario are those that are holding stocks of oil or holding stocks of things that can't get through the Strait of Hormuz at the moment, and then the prices are pushed up and those people will benefit.
There is an argument, I suppose, for building much more resilience by each country having better domestic food security.
Yes, I mean, there is a food security argument that would suggest that people need to focus much more on food security in their own countries. There is an economic argument that says, well, the countries that are able to produce the food at the lowest price or the lowest environmental footprint, those countries should produce that commodity, and then other countries where they can specialise in another commodity should produce those, and then trade should happen, and that should make us all better off. But of course, whilst trade does generally make everyone better off, it does mean that we do need the trade to flow around the world, and that's a little bit of a challenge when we have these disruptions.
There has been concern about price rises in the shops for food and even possibly empty shelves.
I think it will differ depending on the product. So there could well be empty shelves in supermarkets, but I don't think that we're imminently at that point. I mean, if we take the current production year in the UK, for example, a lot of the arable crops are already grown, but they do need this fertiliser to be spread. And if farmers can't get access to the diesel to power the tractors, to spread the fertiliser, then we'll have lower yielding crops in the autumn. So there may be a reduction in supply moving forward. So the knock-on impact of this war may not be felt imminently at the supermarket shelves, but down the line those impacts could well be felt unless this is resolved quite quickly and the international trade flows start moving very quickly as well.
Paul Wilson from the Agricultural Economics Society. This week, the government opened a consultation on its plans to ban trail hunting in England and Wales. There is already a ban in Scotland. In trail hunting, hounds follow a pre-laid animal-based scent. It replaced traditional fox hunting after that was banned in England and Wales in 2004. And as we've reported many times since, it is controversial. Anti-hunt campaigners want clean boot hunting, where hounds follow the scent of humans, or drag hunting using a non-animal scent. They say trail hunting is a smokescreen for the illegal hunting of foxes. Country sports enthusiasts say trail hunting takes place within the law, and those who do break the law are prosecuted under existing legislation. The Countryside Alliance is a vociferous campaigner for hunting. Tim Bonner, its chief executive, spoke to Kaz Graham.
It's not a surprise, but just because it's not a surprise doesn't mean it isn't a bizarre priority. Even if you look simply at the animal welfare strategy, what about all the other issues in there? This apparently is the most important thing. I mean, the consultation itself, there seems to be no real attempt to justify this legislation. We're going to have to go through the whole process in Parliament. We're going to have to battle over that. It was 700 hours the last time a Labour government legislated on hunting. I just find it very, very strange indeed. But a government which says that it's focused on a cost of living crisis, on delivering growth, and yet here we are having an argument over one of the most irrelevant issues that's possible to consider.
Well, many would consider that it's not irrelevant. Obviously, it's not war in the Middle East, but it's not irrelevant. The National Police Chiefs Council have said that trail hunting provides a smokescreen.
The fact is that more people are convicted on the Hunting Act than any other piece of wildlife legislation. What is the problem that the government is seeking to address? If you chase a wild mammal with your dogs, you are committing an offence, and there is ample evidence from the government's own statistics that you will be convicted of that offence. So what are we doing here?
They're not going to ban drag hunting, though, are they? Why can't hunts just move to that?
Hunts will have to adhere to whatever legislation is passed and try to find a way to continue to work within the law. I hope that's a transition that most hunts will be able to make, but there's no guarantee to that. And given the importance that hunts have in rural communities, the social hub, the employment, the services they provide to farmers, the farming community, putting all that at risk on the basis of some undefined problem, it's something that we just can't support at all.
Tim Bonner from the Countryside Alliance. The League Against Cruel Sports is a vociferous campaigner against hunting. Emma Slavinsky is their CEO. She welcomes the consultation on banning trail hunting in England and Wales.
We're delighted. We've been asking the government for a long time to get on with this, so it's great that they have. And we're really pleased to see that, as well as talking about the ban on trail hunting, it also is talking about the wider Hunting Act and ways in which that needs to be tightened up to make sure that we are getting rid of the hunting of foxes and deer and hares for good.
You know, the Countryside Alliance argues that the existing Hunting Act, which took years to thrash out, is adequate and it is able to prosecute law breaking. Haven't they got a point?
No, they don't, I'm afraid. And Chief Superintendent Matt Longman, who leads for the National Police Chiefs Council on this issue, he says the Hunting Act doesn't work. Illegal hunting is prolific and trail hunting is being used as a smokescreen. And just already this season, so from about August last year to now, and the season's not over yet, we've had nearly 600 instances of illegal hunting, and that's just where the hunts are being monitored. You know, no one's trying to stop genuinely simulated hunting, like clean boot hunting with bloodhounds. This is about people who are determined to keep hunting foxes, hares, deer, and will not comply with the law, exploiting every loophole, creating smokescreens. That's why we need the law to be tightened up.
Emma Slavinsky from the League Against Cruel Sports. The government consultation on banning trail hunting in England and Wales closes on June the 18th. Let's round off with something musical and uplifting. It's a farmers' choir. Perhaps we should call them the Farmers' Choir now, because they have made it to the semi-finals of Britain's Got Talent. BBC Look East's Alex Dunlop has been to meet one of the farmers and singers, Ben Brooke.
I always try and belt out a few tunes every day if I'm feeling a bit sad, because, when you're out here by yourself, it can be quite sad.
In a tractor cab on his 2,500-acre farm near March in Cambridgeshire, Ben Brooke cuts a lonely figure as he rolls his fields. He seems more comfortable talking about singing than actually singing.
I don't know if you'd want to hear me sing, to be fair.
Well, with respect, he's wrong, because last weekend millions tuned into Britain's Got Talent on ITV1 to listen to him and 32 fellow farmers sing Elbow's anthem, One Day Like This. Tears were shed, jaws hit the floor, and the crowd, of course, went wild. The question: would a judge press the so-called golden buzzer and give the Hawkston Choir an instant ticket to the show's live semi-finals? Within seconds, Amanda Holden was on her feet. She had no doubts.
And obviously she pressed the golden buzzer. And I looked round and all the choir were just like jumping around, and I was just like, we don't even know if we've got through yet. And then looked down and it was all gold, and I was just like, woo!
I mean, that must have been an immense feeling.
Amazing. It's like being in like a family you didn't know you had. It's just amazing. Like, farming can be like super isolating, and you're in your own thoughts a lot. So if we can raise awareness for mental health within agriculture, that's something that we really want to push.
Research by the Farm Safety Foundation suggests that 95% of young farmers believe that poor mental health is the biggest hidden problem facing the industry. Now, joining a choir, of course, isn't a cure, but it can be an antidote to issues like isolation, encouraging farmers to sing together and to talk to each other.
And it seems singing really does lift the soul. Stephanie Barclay, who runs the Farm Safety Foundation charity, says farmers' choirs are starting up all across the UK.
It's a sense of community. These are people that work 17 hours a day on their own with nobody else to talk to. So finding a community of people that you can get together with, let off a bit of steam and sing your hearts out, well, that's got to be good for your mental health.
The semi-finals of ITV's Britain's Got Talent beckon in May, but Ben says the Hawkston Choir is already a winner.
I mean, that's all it's about for us, is raising awareness in the agricultural industry, just bringing everyone back together. I mean, we're British at the end of the day, we're on Britain's Got Talent, so yeah.
Standing in Ben's grain store, which has near perfect acoustics, I twist his arm for a mini rendition of that winning song.
You've got a new talent. It would be remiss of me not to ask you just give us a few lines.
From the song, you want me to sing from the song?
Yeah, just a couple of lines.
So throw those curtains wide. One day like this a year would see me right.
What a voice. Good luck.
Cheers.
Oh, that's got me weepy all over again. Alex Dunlop there talking to farmer and singer Ben Brooke. And that's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Rebecca Rooney. And Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.